All right, this is the final video of the series, and what we're going to do today is not entirely difficult at all. In fact, we're only going to do one output ID, one output plot, and then render that, and then we'll be done. So let's see what we have so far. Excuse me. If you run the application, the code that we have generated this user interface. And in fact, let's open this in browser. And it gives us a message at the beginning: welcome to the data visualization app. To begin, please upload a CSV. We've created a few widgets here. So you upload a CSV, and what we have is, you already see there's probably a way we can make sure that we have fixed this. And I can just suggest one thing by just making sure that we have selected at least one species here. But the idea is, with that, we have a filter section which dictates what we're going to visualize here. And in fact, if you select some of these things, some of the species here, then we see that we have all the visualizations that we have the metrics by species visualized on the scatter plot. We also have our raw data already fixed up very well, so we don't need to worry about that. You could see exactly what the data looks like, and you have room to filter, right, for things that you are particularly interested in. So the one thing that we haven't done is the distribution plot here. So we're going to render some box plots. That we're going to do today. In fact, I was wrong earlier when I said we're only going to do one thing. We are going to need to add on another menu item here, which wouldn't take us that much time because we've already built this one. And I think one of the changes we should make is to select at least one species, because as you saw when we upload, and we could upload this again, when we upload a CSV, and this is going to reload itself, the first thing we see is the correlation here, but we see an empty canvas. And just to make sure that this is fixed, we could just add, like, for example, we can say that we have selected one species, right? In this case, you'd see this comment at the get-go. So let's go ahead, and making that change is not entirely difficult. So let's see here. Let's go back to our RStudio, and we could either make a change here on numeric by adding a dplyr rule that says if a species is selected, then do that. In fact, let me think this through for a moment, because that might be perhaps the easiest route. No, I think what we can do here is we just in the check group box, let's just add that the selected here is the first species. So what I'm saying is, just give me a scatter plot from the get-go. Right, so if I now upload a CSV, what I do hope to have is already a scatter plot. It's going to select the first one. Okay. Yeah, that's an easy fix. And again, this is a series to help introduce our Shiny, so I'm not terribly worried about making this as as generalizable as possible. But other options you could have is maybe change, add a filter in here so that it corresponds to what has been selected. And in fact, you can only look at one species at a time here. But we would have to, so for the distribution plot, we have to do things, which is what we're supposed to do today. So that was a sidetrack of revising several things we did last time. But what we need to do today is to come here and add another menu item that will help us select the metrics for the box plot, basically, and that would be the X and the Y metric together with the species. Okay. And I mean, at the risk of copying and pasting again, this if you're being introduced to this the first time, I would just rather we write the code ourselves, but we can pretty much just copy and paste what we have above and call it. But again, if this is to introduce our Shiny, so let's go ahead and get some muscle memory on some of these things. So we create another menu item here, and again, the menu item, the first argument is the text, and in this case, what we have is distribution filters. Okay. And then the second is icon. Again, I wish I had taken some time to look at what icon would make sense, but let's just still use th. I think it is done well for us. And now here we're going to do two things. We are going to basically get two check group boxes, just like we've done with species. In this case, we're going to, the first one is going to look at the species again, so input ID, and this instead of being core species, is going to be dist species, and we want the label to be select a species. Oh, we don't, I mean, we just say species. I think we don't need to add the select there. And then the choices, as we have done above, is just species. Yeah, we can, I think we can close this one. We can close this one. I don't see any trouble for closing this one here. And then we have another, in fact, let's use a select input. I wanted to use a group input, but that would make it slightly difficult to do. So we need a select input because a select input would give us one value at a time, while a checkbox input in that case would give us multiple values. Or we could use a radio button, but again, I'll have other series that go extensively into other kinds of input widgets. So in this case, we want we're going to call this a dist, so short for distribution variable, or metric. In fact, let's call it metric. I think that's more appropriate. And then the label for this would be select distribution metric. And then obviously our choices now are going to be the names that we did with the numeric data frame. So that's really one of the reasons why we did the numeric data frame at the very beginning, because we're going to reuse it over and over again. In fact, that's probably the last time we use it. I'm not sure if we're going to use it on the actual box plot. We may, but we may not. Okay, so that concludes the second menu item. And now notice that because this is all under one sidebar menu, the interaction of them might not be as smooth, but you can have them as contained within one sidebar menu, which is the objective of what I wanted to do. So the last thing we need here is then we want to render the distribution plot, render the box plot. I should just call it the box plot, because distribution plot could mean kernel density estimation plots or histogram and things like that. So let's just call it the box plot from now. And what we're looking for is the output. We're looking to generate an output ID of the distribution plot. So that's the name of the ID I'm going to give. And this is again going to be a rendering of the plot, like so. In fact, yeah, like so. And then in there we can add parentheses. Okay. So what do we want to do? Again, as this is a habit for me, I created a temporary df, and this is going to be, we're going to use some dplyr again here, and what we need to do is to filter for the species that have been selected, as we have done in the previous section. So we're going to say species in this case would be input, it'll be as.vector, so we have to convert all of what the user has selected, which is the input of dist species. So I'm just going to copy this. Right? So this will filter the data frame to include only the species that have been selected. Okay? And that's really all we need to do with this plotting df. And now we invoke our ggplot. And in this case, our data is the plotting df. Our mapping is, again, we're going to use the aesthetic string. And in this case, we have our x to be species and our y to be the input of the distribution metric, which is dist metric as we defined here. Okay, and then I also want the color, in this case, to be species, and this should do. And what type of plot I need to have? I need to have a plus there, and this is geom boxplot. This should conclude. This should complete the distribution plot. So I'm just going to copy that. And again, we have our tab panel here for distribution plot. We're going to add a comma, plot output as we have done previously. And just paste it there. We save this and let's run. I'm going to open this in browser. Browse. Upload a CSV. Okay, we know that we have selected at least one of these, so you can close this now. We have the two. We've created our distribution filters here, and you can see, and in fact that should correspond to this. Now we haven't selected any of the species, but if we select a species, we expect that the box plot will show up, and in fact if we selected all three of them, you expect that it will keep updating, which is the intent of what we did. And we see that it has species labeled together with the metric that we're going for, and you can change this metric. In fact, I think, yeah, I changed the metric. I thought I took the same thing. And now you can do a little bit of comparison here. And so that's what we have. So we also have a correlation. What I was talking about earlier is that because we bucketed these two into the same menu item, you might not be able to filter for both of them. And if you wanted to, you could just create a different menu item and render that. And that's really not very difficult to do. Just like how we have created this in one container, just create another container and then render that new container. But we don't have, the scope of this doesn't cover that. So we have a fairly decent application here that gives you a little bit of flexibility of moving things here and there. And you could also look at, you have multiple pages that you can analyze and you can visualize the data. So this sort of concludes this whole series. We have 4 videos in this series. I may actually make one video as the introduction to show what this app is going to look like, just because we've been building it as we go, but the end product is now what we have. And it's as you've seen, we've done most of this using R. I mean, all of this is using R, and there is very little reference to CSS, JavaScript, or HTML, which is powered by it in the background. But the only HTML we've used is a paragraph tag. So I think it's a very good proposition for anyone who is using the R programming language to learn at least how to build an application like this. So again, if there's going to be a few other series with more advanced, shiny building applications like this, so action buttons and using download buttons, for example. So if you're running multiple models and you want to see the output of all those models, then you can do something like that, or initiating something based off the selection. So in this case, everything is reactive, but what if you wanted to select a combination of inputs and then run the application? I'll put another series for a little bit more advanced features on this. But yeah, this is all I got.